And let me share this PowerPoint with you and get this kicked off. Wait, hold on. Sharing the wrong screen. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
All good on my end.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Well, nice to meet everyone. Thank you for coming to this quarter's AEM Engineering Enablement User Group. We're going to be talking about content fragments in AEM, presented by myself and Nicholas Chipping. Nicholas, if you want to say hi quick.
Hi, I'm Nicholas.
It's really great to see some new and familiar faces, and would love to collaborate with you. So feel free to interject or add any comments in the Zoom chat. Be happy to stop and pause along. So I'm going to kind of cover what we're going to be looking at today. Let me go ahead and move to the next slide. We're just going to do a quick intro. We're going to talk about what exactly are content fragments. So if you're relatively new to AEM and you're kind of figuring out what content fragments are, or even if you're not involved in engineering and you're kind of tasked with figuring out what they are as well, we're happy to kind of do an overview of kind of what they are and how they operate. Talking about some of the changes and enhancements that have kind of happened with content fragments, and how to use these content fragments on other platforms. I'm going to talk a little bit about GraphQL and kind of an introduction there. We'll do a demo, a Q&A. We'll talk amongst ourselves if anyone has any tips or tricks around how they've implemented content fragments. And then I kind of sent out an email earlier. I'd love to get some discussion around us as a group about how you've been successful using content fragments, and have it just be more than Nicholas and I just being talking heads, and get a little more of that kind of sharing with each other. We have a lot of knowledge in our head, but we also love to learn from you as well, and kind of doing some knowledge sharing is kind of how we enable each other in building things within the Adobe ecosystem. So let me kind of explain who we are at Bounteous. We were founded in 2003 in Chicago. Bounteous is a leading digital experience consultancy that co-innovates with the world's most ambitious brands to create transformative digital experiences with services and strategy, insights, experience design, technology, analytics, and marketing. Bounteous elevates brand experiences and drives superior client outcomes. So that's a little bit about who Nicholas and I kind of represent, but this is more on how we kind of share information with each other in the community. So just to give you a little background of who we represent, though. My name is Christopher Sands. I've been with Bounteous around 8 years. I'm the AEM Adobe team coordinator. I help organize things within my team, from team stand-ups and team organization. I'm also a senior front-end developer. I'm based out of Detroit, Michigan, just a little bit north of that. So nice to meet y'all, and I'll pass it off to Nicholas.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm Nicholas Chipping. I'm based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, so near some gorgeous mountains and lots of snow. I'm a lead architect here at Bounteous. I've been here about 4 years, and love doing things in AEM and learning about AEM and digging into new information all the time. So,
all right. We're going to cover what are content fragments. Adobe's description is pretty much spot on, especially because they've made the content fragments. Content fragments are a modular and channel agnostic way of content authoring that isn't tied to layouts or templates. That statement of channel agnostic way is a really big emphasis on that, and you'll see why during the presentation. So Nicholas, do you want to cover some changes and enhancements in the content fragments?
So for anyone using AEM Classic, a recent enhancement on 6.5.10 was that now GraphQL is supported on both AEM Classic and in AEM as a cloud service. So that's a nice enhancement. The model editor for content fragments, we'll get into that in a little bit, but for any of you who have used it previously, it's a lot more enhanced now. It supports complex data types, the way for moving things around and adding and editing existing content fragment models has become a lot better. The product and product category references. Oh, actually, I have a mistake on this slide. I apologize, everyone. AEM as a cloud service and AEM Classic support product and product category references. So as long as you have the CIF extension enabled or installed, then that will work on those systems. Sub configurations are also supported, but they don't go, they're not supported in the GraphQL queries. So, and then references are updated when you're moving fragments around. That used to not be the case. So that's nice that that's been improved. And then fixes for tags, references, and asset search within content fragments. So pretty much content fragments can be connected to anything in AEM now, which is awesome. So, okay, let's move on. The capabilities of content fragments. Basically, a content fragment is kind of like an empty box, and you can put whatever you want in the box to define what you're going to, sorry, there's a question that came in. GraphQL. Yes, we will get to that, Mark. Thank you, though, in just a minute. So content fragments, if you think of them kind of like a box, just an empty box that you can define whatever you want that box to do. If you want this box to hold paper plates, you can tell it what kind of paper plates you want, you know, the thickness and the color and all of that sort of stuff. So right here, we just have a listing of the different kinds of content types that this allows. Some of the more complex ones are in that right column, the reference ones, the JSON object, and then the tab placeholder. The ones on the left are more of the basic types, but we will actually get into those in a demo in a little bit here. And then Chris is actually going to go into GraphQL.
Oh, I think you have one on data types.
Complex data types. Yeah, thanks. So we'll get into these, but I just wanted to give kind of a little intro. For a content reference, basically that means that you can think of it as being able to reference an image or any kind of other content within AEM. So whether that's another fragment, you can also have videos or audio, PDFs, all sorts of things like that. And we'll get into an example where we show how that can be used. Fragment references, like I just mentioned, you can use them, but you do have to choose which kind of models are allowed there. So you can specify that when you're going through in the content fragment model editor. And there's different types that you can choose. Any of the ones that you make, you're allowed to choose. And it just allows you to kind of restrict and make sure that the right things are being put in there, which is nice. JSON object is self-explanatory for anyone who uses JSON. And then tabs placeholder, that's more of just a visual indication. So we'll show this as well, but it allows you to organize kind of how the content is authored. So kind of think about it like dialogues in AEM. You might have different tabs and have some different sections in each tab. That's kind of what this is. It's not going to come through when you do any GraphQL queries to get the data, but for organization's sake and building out content fragments, it can be a nice thing for authors. All right, let's move forward, Chris.
Yeah, so a little bit about how we can use these content fragments. Now that kind of Nicholas mentioned that once we build kind of these containers for the type of data, you know, Nicholas mentioned, the types of plates. Is it a paper plate? Is it a porcelain plate? Or I lovingly like to say, you could construct a content fragment structure of, dogs, if they're short-haired or long-haired. You have all this data, and we want to be able to use that data however we'd like, wherever we want it. It doesn't necessarily have to be in an AEM site. It could be all over the place. So content fragments are platform agnostic, making it easy to share content between the different types of applications, so you don't necessarily have to use it on a website. They're meant to be reusable. They're specifically relevant to my role. They're presentation agnostic, so without any styles or layouts attached. So once you kind of I'd say remove the presentation from the data, you can pretty much do anything you'd like with it. Structured content models like text, images, and references between content fragments maximize the reuse of that content, so you can use them in all sorts of different channels that you create. So if you create a content fragment once and deliver it headlessly to an app, or easily drag and drop it to a new page anytime, there's lots of uses with content fragments. Think fridges, apps, smart screens, digital assistants, kiosks, digital signage, or any IoT devices, and of course websites. So I jokingly like to say, what toaster are you going to use, and what content fragments are you going to display on your smart toaster with a screen? Does anyone else have any uses for content fragments that maybe I haven't thought of, or does anyone have a creative way of using content fragments that maybe I even like to say a little unorthodox, or as any creative or interesting ways? Has anyone used them specifically in any other way? I'm sure someone out here has used them. All right, well, if anyone's looking for ideas, there's a couple of ways, and you'll have to send me a picture when you've got your content fragment data on your smart toaster. So yeah, now that we have our content fragments, we need a layer or a query language to be able to build out the content from AEM into our application. So use something like the GraphQL API, which helps build a robust and powerful querying language to expose the data of our content fragments. Below here, I've got an image of kind of what those queries are kind of structured like. This one's based off of some of the documentation from Adobe. So there's a really good page that includes a really good step-by-step guide on actually how to implement and build your queries and build the connections there. So this is just an example of what you would see, and then the JSON response on the right-hand side that you can then use on any of your applications. And there's also some great tools for testing and debugging your queries. GraphQL utils, GraphQL, which actually Adobe recommends in their documentation. I know a lot of my team uses Postman and GraphQL Explorer to also kind of debug and troubleshoot and build your queries as you go along. And this is another example of how one of your queries kind of translates to a response in JSON, which you can pretty much use anywhere that can consume it. So like I said before, any of your headless apps, a native app, React Native, you can use all this information to build all of your layouts that you need once you have the data that you have. So this is kind of an example of what a query would look like and then the response. Does anyone have any questions, or let me see if there's anything in the chat here that I'm missing. Oh yeah, here we go. Digital signage, yeah, that'd be great. I know some folks use them for kiosks and all sorts of things. So this is a picture of my my dog Tilly in her lobster outfit, and now that means we're on for a demo from Nicholas here. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Oh. Just a sec. Apparently I did not. I apologize. I have to rejoin, Chris. I forgot that this is a new computer and I haven't shared my screen.
Oh, yeah, permissions.
Give me just a sec.
Oh, no problem at all. We'll take this as a quick break. Feel free to grab some water, or if anyone has any questions or.
Yeah. Ritesh had a question, and I apologize, I misspelled the name when I responded in chat regarding customizations on the GraphQL queries for the content fragment model. I was curious if Ritesh, if you'd be willing to like expand upon your question a little bit.
Hi, yes, thanks for taking my question. So an example could be a dynamic property which gets created like as an author type in and fill data for a content fragment. Now consider a new property which just gets saved automatically. Like it's not an user input field, but based on maybe the name of the user, the title of the user, it gets generated by the Java code. So in a nutshell, what I'm asking is, Sling models on a basic component property gives a lot of power and flexibility to write custom code and modify it. Does such mechanism available at the content fragment model?
Not that I am aware of. Brett, I don't know if you know of anything for that, but
Yeah, I certainly not aware of anything like on the fetching side of things, like since the GraphQL goes directly at the content in the JCR, so there's no actual Sling model to kind of like instrument the coding of how that data would be transformed. However, if it's data and calculated fields that can either be calculated, on entry of the data in AEM, you can obviously modify the authoring interface with some JavaScript and such to automatically populate those fields, or if you want to have a scheduled job behind the scene that would populate data into the content fragment. But in terms of like the content fragment returning different data to different users, or based on some other parameter, that might be a bit of a challenge, since as these things like there's caching mechanisms and such for persistent queries where that would kind of break that model if the data returned differently to different users, for instance. So I guess, maybe we could just talk through a use case, or, we could definitely do it offline, or at the end of this call, if we want to kind of walk through a use case, we can maybe kind of solution a bit on the fly.
Sure, makes sense. Thank you.
And Gareth, we'll if we get a chance after Nicholas's demo, we'll definitely answer your question. I think you had one on capturing and maintaining metadata around content fragments, but yeah, we can address that after the demo.
all right. Sorry for having to jump off, everyone. Now I can actually share my screen.
Sorry, new laptop problems. It happens.
Poor world that we live in. Get computers. Okay. All right. So up here on my screen, I have two different AEM instances. This one with the Adobe logo is the AEM as a cloud service instance. This is my 6.5 classic instance. I want to say this is 15. Yeah, 6.5.15. Okay. So this is only going to be open for a second here, but I wanted to show the difference between navigation in AEM Classic. In order to go into content fragment models, you have to go here to the tools section and then go to assets, and then you can go to content fragment models. Whereas over here in AEM as cloud service, you just go to the tools section, and in general, it's down here. So it's a little easier, less clicks to get to in AEM as cloud service, but it is still there in classic. So if we go in to global, and let's create a new one, we will call it hot dog test, because hot dogs are the best. And let's go make the same one over here in AEM Classic without a space. And then just to show the difference in UI, not much of a difference at all, but you can see that Classic looks a little bit different than AEM as cloud service. So that's all I'm going to show on Classic versus AEM as cloud service. I just wanted to note that there is a difference for navigating to these, but otherwise the supported data types and other things are the same. We kind of walked through some of the enhancements, and those things have been made on AEM Classic as well as cloud service. So anything that you see here should be available in Classic. But all right. So one of the complex data types that we talked about earlier was content reference. So I wanted to walk through that really quick. Let's put one here. I wanted to mention a couple of different things. So this first field says render as, and I know this is a technical demo, but I promise it's worthwhile. We can say multiple field, but what does that necessarily mean? It basically means we're going to have multiple content references available. So when I go to create a content fragment from this model, I can either just have a single content reference, or I can have a multi-field of content references. Basically, my authors can add as many as they want, or I can say, all right, I only want them to be able to add 4. And then I can name it something, so reference for testing. I can also give it a root path. So if I want this in the DAM, I can specifically say that I only want them referencing things in the DAM. And then I can also specify like file sizes and that sort of thing for images if we're going to use images. So another interesting thing of editing these in the content fragment model editor is if you want to add another item here, just go back to data types. Properties is for the currently selected one. And then I can go and add others here. It automatically switches to properties. But as soon as I click save, it jumps out of there. So just be aware of that. And then let's see. One thing that I do want to go over, if we go back to content, well, let's add a content reference down here. And on this one, we will call it content reference. I can type. And we can specify what type on a content reference as well. So we talked about that a little earlier, but we can say whichever of these types that we want it to be limited to, and AEM will automatically limit it to that specific type. I don't think I have any PDFs in my DAM at the moment, but if I did, that's what I would have to put in this field if I fill it out. So I'm going to cancel for now and go to create a new content fragment here. And let's create a folder, test folder. And if I go in here and I want to create a content fragment, I can't. What's going on? Well, this is one of the things that you do need to be aware of. It's a little bit different than some of the other permissions in AEM, but basically if you click on this folder, you go to properties, just make sure to go over to the policies area, and then you can allow fragment models by path or by tag. So if you have multiple that you've tagged with a certain thing, you can allow those by that way. I usually just do it by path. So let's allow hot dog test, and then I can close that. And now if I want to create one, let's open that. So now I can add any references that I want here. If I want an image reference, I have that. If I want to reference some other content fragment, I can do that. And then I didn't name this text field, but I can save that. So now I have a content fragment. That's a really basic one. So it doesn't necessarily give us much to work with, and it's not a great real world example. So let's create a different one that is something that maybe we would use in the real world. If we go back into our content fragment model editor, and we go back here, let's create a dog model. Because who doesn't like dogs? Some people don't like dogs. So let's go through. We are going to have a name for a dog. We want to have their breed. And then we want to have enumeration allows us to have drop-down checkboxes or radio. So I want this to be a drop-down, and I want this one to be called hair. So we have long, medium, short. Okay. And then let's skip some of the other ones. And then we can do a single line text. And this one we're going to do a multi-field. And then dog traits. So you might be thinking, what does that have to do with anything? Well, we'll find out really soon. So again, let's go enable this right here. We're going to enable our new new dog model in this policy. And then we can create some dogs. So first, let's make Tilly, because she's just a cute little dog. So she is a French Bulldog. Is that right, Chris?
Yep, that is correct.
All right, she's got short hair. Tilly is cute. Tilly is friendly, without a capital R. And likes to wear costumes. Good job, Tilly. Okay, now let's create another dog, not a file. I have a rollerball mouse, so sometimes I click the wrong things. Let's make Boggy. He was my backyard friend dog that I had growing up. And he was a golden retriever. He had long hair. And he is friendly, fun to play with, and cuddly. So I can add as many things as I want here. Okay, so now that we're done with that part, let's see how we can look at this information in a way that would be used in a different system. So now we're going to go to the GraphQL interface. If we go here and right down here, GraphQL editor, keep in mind, if you go here and you haven't added an endpoint, you do need to do that first. So that is right here, manage GraphQL endpoints. I just added test endpoint. I didn't even have to give it a path. I just gave it a name and it will automatically kind of grab a path in a brand new instance. So if you're doing local testing, that's kind of easy to get going on. But let's go over here. So let's make a query. I want a dog model list. So let's get all the dogs. And then a nice thing with this, as you start typing, it already knows the models that you have in your system. So because this is the built-in editor, there is a tool that you have to install, I believe, on AEM Classic to have this functionality. But I actually think that's later in our presentation, so we'll get there. But I start typing dog and it's like, oh, cool. I know that you have a dog model. You want to see all of your dogs? And I said, yes. And I'm going to command click or control click if you're on Windows. Now I can say, okay, I'm going to get dog model results. So I'm going to look at that for each item. It's going to be a dog model. I guess I shouldn't have named it model. But then I can go ahead and start just putting these in. So items. So dogs have a name, they have a breed, they have a hair type, and they have dog traits, which is I just realized I haven't done this. I don't know if that'll all come through, but we'll see. Oh, cool, it just does. So the nice thing with GraphQL is maybe on certain queries, you need some information, but you don't need other information. So maybe you only need the dog name and their hair type for certain queries that you're going to be showing. So you can only pass that information in. You're not going to be getting extra information, because maybe dog traits, maybe you have dogs that have like 50 traits, and it's really helpful on the info page for that dog, or when someone wants to see details on their phone, on their app, they want to learn about that dog breed, but they don't want to, you don't need to query and get all of that information for speed reasons and that sort of thing when you're just showing a list of dogs. So in that case, maybe take out dog traits, and then we can have a much smaller return theoretically. So that's kind of a really basic example. I did build out some other content that I wanted to show. So let's do that real quick. If we go and look at the models that we have here in the editor, I added, there's this locations model that we have. There's a sports team model and then an album model. So between all of those, again, same thing, we can query. So I can make it pretty. Okay. Guess I didn't. Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. I didn't. And then from there, we should have items. Ready. Okay. So cool. We have a location in Detroit, and Chris is the contact person. That's kind of cool. Atlanta. No one lives there apparently. No one lives in Chicago. We have Cowboys Way with Chickless Nipping. That's a weird name. And then the Foundry. So some of Bounteous's locations are in here, but just showing that we can get all sorts of information here. We do have a query for this hero image, and you'll see that this has an on image ref. So if I command click on this, and again, this is just kind of GraphQL interesting information, you can see that the type is reference. There's all of these different types here. So if it was an album model reference, I could have different information. So it's kind of cool. On GraphQL, I could say album model. And if it's an album model that gets returned, well, I want the name, I want the year, and I want, whatever information from there. So having these references and specifically being able to kind of dig into the types on GraphQL is really helpful as you're building queries out. But again, if you don't need certain information for a specific query, you can just rip that out and say, I only want these basic details for this page or for this specific query. I keep saying page because I'm used to web development, but if we're going for the toaster, we probably just want the name and the email, because toasters probably don't have a very big screen. Right, Chris?
Yes. We have a couple questions in the chat if this is a good pausing point for a second.
Okay. Yeah, let's jump to that. My demo is basically done. I just wanted to show some different capabilities. I'll keep my screen open just in case we're gonna walk through some stuff. So let me look at the questions. Okay, absolutely a sandwich. Very good, Chris. No wildcard to get all the fields. That can be from one to every field. Yeah, I don't know of a wild card, Robert. So I think you're right on that. I don't think there is a wild card to get all the fields for a given location in a list.
No, there isn't. The whole idea of GraphQL is to force you to make a smaller subset. So, instead of just hitting something with the old .json, .infinity, then where you get everything, this allows you to only get parts, because you get a lot of extra fields in your persistent content fragment other than just these values.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that could turn into one nasty response.
Sometimes it does, which is why this is so nice. I've really enjoyed, I've used it on a few different projects. It's nice to streamline things. Okay, so there's a question about, can we use it to retrieve experience fragments data? You might be able to, I haven't looked at that specifically, but what makes it so applicable to content fragments specifically is it's the data types, right? Whereas an experience fragment is actually putting different components in and that sort of thing. So in order to support that, I would assume that there would need to be some other things built out in order to allow that kind of thing. You might be able to add your own custom GraphQL definitions. I haven't looked into that in AEM yet, but I would assume that's probably what you'd have to do if you wanted to support your specific kind of experience fragment. You'd have to have like a model set up for that.
Yeah,
So-
the other recommendation that I had I put in the chat would be, you know, similar to if you want some of the content from your website to be available, is to kind of abstract that content out of the components directly into content fragments, so that not only can you get that content from GraphQL, but then your components on your website can simply get the content from the content fragments. So you still have one place where that content is authored and managed, but both places can use it. So there's just one level of abstraction to your website versus putting it directly into components, which is the same challenge that you would have with the experience fragments.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm looking at the questions and it looks like, Brett, you've responded to a couple of them. Sorting and paging supported. There is sorting. I haven't looked at pagination. Let's see. If anyone else knows the answers to these questions, please speak up. We're not the only people who've used it, so I'm sure a lot of you already know the answers. But absolutely you can sort. So if I click on this, there's filter. So you can filter based on different things, whatever the model has in it, you can filter. So if it's based on strings, you can make sure it equals or that it contains that sort of thing. Numbers, you know, if it's within a certain zip code or range of zip codes. So there's different filters that you can do. I'm not sure on pagination though. Let's see. Example where you. I think we can start questions out loud. I'm going to read through a couple of these and see if I can respond on here, but I'm going to do that for just a sec. Paging is not currently supported. Thanks, Sudhir.
Yeah, I think a lot of that they end up just suggesting doing it on the front end or whatever, however you're consuming it at that point.
Yeah.
So on sorting, hi, this is Ritesh.
Hi.
Hi. So on sorting, we did read an article that it is possible, but however, on the AEM as a cloud version, it was breaking for us, meaning we just use the syntax mentioned on the Adobe documentation. So we were unsure whether it has to do with the version of cloud we were using, or does it only work on, you know, on-premise AEM 6.5?
Sorting should work. Or like filtering. So let's go to a different kind of object. Actually, I'm gonna. I think I have my sports team query up here. Sports.
And if we need to come back and look at some of the questions, we can always get back with. This is great that we're getting so many questions now after our second session, and love to at least document some of the questions together so we can answer them as a group. That'd be great.
I did that.
Pushpa has a question that I'd love to document.
Oh, create a fragment model based on selection of check mark or radio button. Show different set of text fields. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I would have to dig in. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I think a few of these questions it would be fun to, work on together, or at least take back, and then we can maybe email out the group after we've looked into and tried to find an answer for them. My sports team thing is not. Let me make sure that I'm doing it right. Okay. That should work now. Nope. Am I missing one? Okay. So there we go. I made some different sports teams, and I wanted to just show that we have references here, but also, oh no, that was my albums. My albums has references to other content fragments, but I guess we already kind of saw how that worked. Yeah, I think we'll stop on the demo side of things now, and we can get back to the slides, Chris, and then we can get some more into the questions and potentially respond in an email after the fact, just to make sure that we get everyone's questions covered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Chris. Are you pulling up the slides?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
one more second. Here we go.
There, I yawned. I don't know if you did it while I was gone, Chris, but I did it for you.
I saw that. Here, let me I hate how PowerPoint takes over your screen while you're trying to share it. So I'm just gonna go ahead
Yes.
and try this again. We'll do desktop 1, share, and then PowerPoint. There we go. See if this works.
Nice.
All right. So tips and tricks. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay. So we will share this deck out after, which means you can get the links from it and that sort of thing. But you will, for AEM Classic, that's what I was meaning. You'll need the GraphQL index package. So that's something that we're including here. And then I'm just going to read through this because it's kind of a long thing. I don't want to misspeak, but when you're trying to move, delete, or publish content fragments or sites or pages, there can be an issue where content fragment references are fetched as the background query fails, so it doesn't work. To ensure the correct operation, you have to add certain properties to the index definition. So you don't have to re-index, but just make sure to add these parts onto the DAM asset Lucene index. Or if you're building up to AEM as a cloud service, make sure to pull that one down and put this into your code as well. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so we did go over this one. I wasn't sure if we would in the demo, but I think I made a point of it. You do want to make sure to add a policy on the given folder where you want to use your content fragments or the definition of the models. So any folder that you want to use those in, you'll have to specify on that policy of that folder that you want to use either the path to that specific model or the tag of any models that you have. And then for debugging, Chrome IQL is one that I use, or Postman. I guess, Chris, how would you say that? Chrome QL?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of
I'm not sure.
For the other one. Chrome, yeah.
Yeah. I also included a document there for installing the GraphQL interface or GraphQL. I don't know how you want to say that, Chris. I'm sorry.
Graphy. I call it
GraphQL. Okay. GraphQL interface for 6.5. So that's there. Yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas, for the demo. And I kind of like to open this up to anyone who's still on the call. If you have any experiences or have anything you even like to show off, if you're able to. I know some of us are bound to certain things that we're unable to share, but even if you have any, kind of open the floor to any experiences or successful showcases that they had in the past. Would love to have you sound off and have us not be the talking heads all the time for you.
Otherwise, if there's any other questions too from the chat that were unanswered, if anyone wants to bring them up now, we could try to dive in.
Yeah, let's see. Let me try to scroll through. Nicholas, are there any other questions in the chat that you want to cover?
Let's see.
I think Robert had one around paths and text fields.
Yeah, apparently the validator has a limit on how many paths it will validate. And I had like a list of several images and it would error out when I tried to get the content because it would try to validate everything that looked like a URL. I was wondering if anybody has tried to turn that off, if that was possible, or we ended up hiding it inside a JSON object.
It's a good question, and I don't know if I was any other response. I know there's been use cases where we turn it off. I believe it's configurable in OSGI, not specifically on content fragments and GraphQL requests, but I'm curious if it could be adjusted that same way. Because I believe it could be turned. I wonder if you could turn up the maximum number of links, and then I think you also can adjust. Like I think you might be able to give it parameters as to what types of links and maybe exclude certain ones.
Yeah, it was just painful because it was just the only way you knew it was happening was there was an obscure error message in the error log.
Elvin had a pretty good question, Brett or Nicholas or anyone else really. They're looking for a strategy recommended for creating new components, author content on the component versus content fragments. And then also, is it worth moving content fragments for existing component based pages? So moving content from components into content fragments. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I think if you're doing for headless, a single page, then it makes sense. But if you're just doing normal components in AEM, I don't think it gives you anything.
Yeah,
The idea is you just get a bunch of values instead of all the properties on a given component.
Yeah, I echo what you're saying, Robert. Like I would urge people not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's definitely a push for headless right now in the industry, and so I think we should all there's also the balancing of like, why did you get AEM? And part of why you got AEM was for that awesome author experience. And if we abstract away the authoring all into form-based entry and content fragments, it really, and not to mention it's form-based entry, but it's also outside the context of the page where an author that's looking at a page, now they have to go to this other place, create content there, and then link it in. It's a more complex process. So I think when we're putting that in, we want to be doing that deliberately. The way I kind of think of things is I kind of think of content as two different categories. I think of content as in editorial, readable, prose type content, like a hero banner. A hero banner, you're not fetching hero banner content probably as a content as like use in other areas. It's very contextual what you're using. It's going to change off and stuff like that. It's not really like data. Like I think of data as like a location, a store location. That's a piece of data that might be used for multiple different things. You're going to calculate maybe distances off of it, such like that. And I know it's a little bit of a gray area as to how you term the two things, but that's kind of how I look at it. And I think what you find on your websites, there's still a lot of just straight up content in text boxes and imagery and heroes and videos that it probably doesn't make sense to put all of that into content fragments.
Yeah, I think like you touched on the right point, because like the trending factors now, right? The headless. So maybe technology side, people think headless, then like maybe business feels like it's more of authoring, right? Like, so now the balancing fact, right? Maybe yeah, at least is it maybe getting ready for omni-channel, right? That's what I raised the question. Otherwise, yeah, that totally makes sense. Maybe it's a balance between the general content versus the context specific component, right? Keeping it in the places and maybe sharing it. Okay, thank you.
100%. I would urge you to actually have a real use case before you start pushing everything into content fragments, because I think, you know, whenever somebody says omnichannel, it sounds like a great idea, and it is a great idea. But like, let's say you've got a hero component on your website. Well, you might have 3, 4, 5 sentences in that hero component that's marketing content that you think you would reuse. But if you think about it, when you use it on email, maybe you reduce it down to 3 sentences. When you use it on mobile, maybe you actually reduce it down to 1 sentence. So it's not truly omni-channel, right? In all cases.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one place I worked at, we used content fragments for source of truth for like third-party pages, where they could, you know, so an author could fill in the data, and then they would use AEM for the configuration.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense.
I think they had like 4 or 5 different client services that all wanted to use the same content. So it just made AEM the source of truth, and they could pull the content fragment information that way.
Well, I know we're kind of winding down.
Maybe
ahead.
this
Oh, sorry.
is yeah, this is Albin again. Like maybe out of context question, but when we are talking about GraphQL and headless, I want to ask one question. So how the new people's approaching new clients, or some they are approaching AEM? Is it like people are more going with the head-on or full stack architecture still, are like more of they are using as a headless? So I know it's out of the out of context question, but if you have any view on that.
Yeah, so I'm involved in pre-sales quite a bit. So from what I'm seeing in the industry, I definitely see the use cases, and what I actually believe is correct is AEM works as a phenomenal headless platform when you're also going to use it as a head full platform. If you're purely going to use AEM as only a headless platform, really it's a little bit of a sledgehammer to nail an attack. I mean, you've got way more functionality. A headless CMS is far more simplistic. It's a far more simplistic use case because you're taking a lot of the responsibility out of the CMS, right? Yep. And so I know it's not an exciting thing to talk about these days, the monolith, and everybody hates the monolith. But that monolith does give you a lot of benefits. The idea that I can author a page that I can directly see, that I can pull in images directly from a DAM and not have to worry about integration, all that kind of stuff. And to me, what I've seen so far, like in terms of like what clients are looking for, is I see clients that are either looking for headless or head full AEM. There's still some of that, but a lot more commonly, I'm starting to see they want both worlds. We want, for the marketing content, we want to give the marketers the ability to author those like traditional AEM components. But then for some of this reusable content, for some of these application use cases, we're going to put that stuff into content fragments with GraphQL.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, makes sense.
Siva had an interesting question for every. Oh, I think Nick just answered it. Never mind.
Yeah, maybe I'll add more details. Like, so what if you want to maintain like the different content for different locales, and so if you're going with the content fragments, so which provides the option to expose the content to the different applications. So in that case, like if you have to maintain different content for different locales, then so does content fragment support MSM as well?
I think content fragments allow for variation, so you could probably choose a variation in your query.
No, but the variation is different, kind of different, right? Maybe like so when you say variation, like so the MSM, the benefit of MSM is like, so where you update in the source, the blueprint, and then the same changes will be rolled out to the all the live copies. And then, so let's take a region, and within the region, there will be multiple locales. And so there might be like setup content. So some region, some locales will be sharing the same, and then different locales, in particular locales, if you have to change the content, so then, so MSM will provide the option, right? So that if the content fragments doesn't have the option, then so there is a limitation to update the content for those specific locales, right?
It's definitely a great question, Siva. Like certainly translation is supported by simply having language master structure, and you can translate. Whether or not content fragments support localization and inheritance breaking full MSM like experience fragments and sites do, that's actually a good question. I don't know the answer offhand. I'm not sure if Chris or Nicholas, if you do either, if we'll just need to follow up with the team and ask.
I have not dug into that one, so I'd have to test it out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I really want to thank everyone for joining and more importantly, participating in all the questions and discussions. It's great hearing from all of you and hearing all of your questions and even helping answer questions too. So thank you all for participating and being part of this community that we're trying to build. And we've got some other upcoming topics. I just wanted to share with you that Nicholas and I are going to be probably putting up on the on Bevy soon. We've got preparation and moving to AEM as a cloud service, custom RT editor plugins, setup and integration of Adobe Target, headless AEM integrations, and multi-site setup and operation. So those are some of the topics we're probably going to do quarterly. Coming into even next year, since we're doing them quarterly, we may end up doing a little bit more or less than that. So if you have any questions or have any suggestions of things you'd like us to maybe tackle as a community, as well as present yourself with us, that'd be great to have you. And I hope you all have a wonderful Tuesday and a wonderful week. And yeah, stay connected. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you. And yeah, thank you, Brett, for throwing all those email addresses in there. And thank you to Chase for giving us a platform to do fun things with AEM. So yeah, we'll catch you all later. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Great job.
Thank you.